Hey there, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we bring you a new release. In our From the Vault episodes, we share past podcast releases from our 3 different podcast series, Recover Ed, Recovered Interviews with Alcoholics, and Hope for the Family. Our podcasts aim to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholics, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for listening.
All right. Hello, podcast listeners and ladies on the call. My name is Stephanie Crawford, and I am the host of this podcast. And so today we're going to have the wonderful, beloved Maggie's chair and volunteer, Cindy Murphy, and she's going to be doing a foundation meeting. And if you love this one and you haven't heard her principles and promises, that episode will have been released by the time this one is. So check it out. It should be the release date for that one would be October 29th. So I'm going to turn it over to Cindy and her do her thing. Tell us what a foundation meeting even is. And I'm excited to see what we learned today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, everybody. I am Cindy Murphy. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is January the 18th of 2003. A foundation meeting is really important. I walked into a meeting and I got the feeling that what was just people sitting around and sharing with each other and supporting each other. And that way would be the way we would get sober. I later on found out there were steps involved, but I didn't know that from the beginning. I did see some steps on the wall, and I kind of thought it was a checklist, of something I just sort of worked in my head. I didn't pay close attention to it. And I'm not blaming anyone for that. Everybody only has what they have to share. And meetings, they don't really take the steps seriously. That's unfortunate, but it's not their fault. It wasn't presented to them adequately. So the purpose of a foundation meeting is to give an adequate presentation of what this disease is and what the solution to this disease is. It's not just loosey-goosey, like take walks, do yoga, go to church, all these things that reason tells us are good reason or good ways to get sober. There's a real definite way to get sober. And so that's what I'm here to do today, is to, with God's help, to give you the best and most adequate presentation of what this program really is. If you have a big book, and I hope you do, and anybody listening to this now or in the future, please have a big book, because I'll be going straight from the book. One point I had 7 years of sobriety just going to meeting, but I had 12 years of relapse after that. And so it took me a long time. Even once I had an adequate presentation given to me and I had taken step 1 and I really meant it, I still drank again. And it wasn't until January the 18th of 2003 that everything came together and I was done for good and for all. But the first thing that I read, which I had never seen before, was the title page of the book, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. It says we have recovered from alcoholism. And I thought that was politically incorrect to say that we will always be recovering. I am not cured of alcoholism. I can promise you that. If I reached for a drink right now and swallowed it, I would be off to the races in no time. I mean, it would be all over. I'm not cured of this disease. I will never, ever be able to safely drink alcohol. But I do recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So let's move on. And if you'll go over to the preface, in the second paragraph, it says, because this book has become the basic text of our sobriety, that's in the second paragraph, and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. The key word here is basic text. We may have a lot of books on alcoholism. I've got a shelf in my office right now filled with books about alcoholism. Those are all well and good and fine to read at some point in your sobriety. But the only book that contains the directions on how to get sober and stay sober for good and for all, as Dr. Bob says, is in this book. So this is our basic text. This is going to give us exact directions on how to do this. If it's no different than if I were actively drinking. If I were actively drinking and I just moved to Dallas and I didn't know where a liquor store was, and I thought Stephanie knew where a liquor store was, and she'd say, yes, I know exactly how to get to the liquor store. And she gave me directions. I promise you, I would follow those directions to the letter. You know, I wouldn't be looking for shortcuts. I wouldn't be trying to intuit my way there. I wouldn't be singing songs along the way. I would follow those directions to the letter to get liquor, right? And it's the same way with recovery. If I want to recover from alcoholism and be free and be sober, I have to follow these directions to the letter. Okay, in the foreword to the first edition, it says, this is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. There are more than 100 men and women who have recovered. Again, he uses the word recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. When I was actively drinking, it was absolutely hopeless. It was hope. I could quit drinking for periods of time, but I couldn't stay quit. So it's hopeless, but the truth is it's just seemingly hopeless because we do have a solution for it. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So again, follow these directions. This is precisely what they did, and what they precisely got was recovery from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It goes on to say, for them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. Even to this day, most people who are not alcoholics do not comprehend that we are really, really sick. We aren't just partying too much. We aren't just goofy. Well, I mean, we may be all those things, but we absolutely are sick. We have it's recognized by the American Medical Association. We are a sick people. It says, and besides, we're sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. This 12-step program is being applied to over 200 fellowships at last count. So these same steps work for other addictions as well. I will only be talking about alcoholism because I'm an alcoholic. But these same steps can be applied to other addictions as well. Okay. So it says we have a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. We're going to address the body first. What is wrong with my body? In step 1, it says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. The powerlessness refers to this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Because of my body, I am definitely powerless over alcohol. If you will flip over to, if you're in a 4th edition, Roman numeral 28, that's XXV 3 eyes. And this is what's wrong with my body. Dr. Silkworth writes, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics, that means forever alcoholics, is a manifestation of an allergy. I can promise you, I heard that back in the 80s, that I had an allergy to alcohol. I absolutely blew that off. I didn't believe that because I didn't break out in hives. And I would hear people say things like, well, I broke out into handcuffs or something like that. That was not an adequate presentation of this program. The truth is, I absolutely have an allergy to alcohol. And my allergy is this phenomenon of craving. It's limited only to this class. I am an alcoholic. It's only limited to people like me. I was out last night with a bunch of really old men who were sailors who had gone sailing that day. And they all were sitting there having their cocktail. And they had one cocktail and that was it. They didn't develop the phenomenon of craving. It always, to this very day, it shocks me when somebody sips a drink. When I start to drink, I want more. And that's the allergy. This phenomenon of craving refers only to the allergy to alcohol. It's reserved. Craving is a word that's reserved only for what happens to me once I start to drink. Once I start to drink, I can't stop. And the longer I drank and the older I got, the faster I could get it down. I could get it down faster than anything. I've got this has seltzer water in it, which I'll be sipping from time to time. I filled it at about 9 o'clock this morning, and I'm not even close to being finished with it. But if this had booze in it, it would have been gone by 9:30. And I didn't understand people who could sip. I still to this day don't understand that. But that's because for me, drinking means drinking it fast. And that's because my body is demanding more alcohol. This allergy is caused, this is not in the book, so you don't have to take my word for it, but it helped me to understand the allergy. This allergy is caused by a dysfunctional liver and pancreas. My body does not produce the right enzymes to break down alcohol efficiently. You know, most people, when they drink, they sweat out all the alcohol or pee it out or whatever. For me, my body isn't going to break it down that way. It's going to hold on to some of that ethanol, which will combine with other chemicals in my body to produce a substance called THIQ. And I don't know what that word is, but it's some really long word. And that's what produces this phenomenon of craving. And that's why you see it in families or in different races of people, like the Irish, for example. There's a lot of alcoholism with Irish people. And in my family, there's alcoholism. I was the first person to come out as an alcoholic, but as it turns out, I've got nieces and nephews and people going way back who were alcoholic that I didn't know about. So that's one reason why we can see it as a genetic disorder. My body is different. It's just made different. And so once I start to drink, I can't stop. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. Oh my gosh, I know you all can relate to this. I mean, children, parents, spouses, whomever are begging us not to drink. And we swear, just as in Bill's story, he wrote his name in a Bible. I mean, we swear it off and we really mean it, right? But none of that is going to keep me from picking up the next drink. And we'll be talking more about that, the reason for that in a minute. If you'll turn back a page underneath Dr. William D. Silkworth's signature, it says, the physician who at our request gave this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe. I have to fully get that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as mine. I must believe that my body is different. I must believe that any time I pick up a drink, it's not going to go well. It's not going to be one drink. I must believe this body part. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. So that's the first part of step one. I'm powerless over alcohol because once I ingest alcohol, it produces the phenomenon of craving, and then terrible consequences are going to follow. Sometimes my consequences were not that terrible. Sometimes they were a little bad, like drunk dialing. Isn't that the worst? Or drunk texting or whatever. Sometimes the consequences would get much worse. We would get DWIs, we would have car wrecks, we would get violently ill. Throwing up from drinking, I always thought was just part of the game. Throwing up from drinking means my body has been poisoned. Okay, so that's a consequence. Anyway, I have to believe, I have to understand this powerlessness from my body means that I'm powerless over control. I have no control over alcohol once I start to drink. And that's the first thing I have to really understand. The second thing I have to understand is that I'm also powerless over choice. And that's the worst part of the disease. I can't do anything about the allergy except not to drink. That's my solution to the allergy problem. I don't pick up a drink, and that's what I'm doing to this very day. I don't pick up alcohol. I'm good to go. But what kept me from getting sober all those years is I didn't understand that I was also powerless over choice. And that's the insanity or the mental part of this disease. Let's turn to real pages. We're going to go to page 20. Let's see, 23 at the top. It says these observations, and they're talking about the observations of the allergy, would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. So as long as I don't take the first drink, I'm good to go. And then it says, and always when I'm doing Maggie's first step meetings, I read this 3 times. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. This is the hardest part for alcoholics to get. And the only way we get there is to drink enough, to go through that cycle. We'll go back to the cycle. We'll go back to where we were on XXV3I's 28. Men and women drink essentially the bottom of the page because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while we admit it is injurious, I know it's causing me problems. I'll admit that. Yeah, it's a problem. They cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. The truth about me is every time I drink, something bad is going to happen. At the very least, I'm going to throw up. At the very, and that's the very least. That's the truth. Bad stuff is going to happen. But I buy into the false. You know, my mind is poisoned by alcohol, is delusional about alcohol. And I really believe that this time it's going to be different. This time I will lock myself in my room. I will just stay there and I'll be okay. And I'll try that desperate experiment of the first drink one more time. It says to them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. I don't know about you guys, but drinking was just normal. I mean, I had to have a drink everywhere I was. I carried little bottles in my purse. If I took my child shopping, you know, and we're just going to have a nice shopping day, I'd have to have a little bottle of alcohol in my purse to slip into the bathroom and you know, re-up. That became normal. It became normal to me to hide alcohol, to hide my empties in other people's trash can. It was crazy. I had to have a drink before I could even like make up the bed in the morning. If I made up the bed, toward the end, that was out the picture. But I mean, just to get anything done, I had to drink. That became normal to me. It was like medicine. I thought of it as my medicine. I thought that I was just a little too sensitive for this world. You guys don't understand. I'm a very sensitive soul. I'm probably an artist and don't know it. I'm probably like Ernest Hemingway. I need alcohol in order to function because the world's edges are just too sharp for me. And this is the only way I know how to get through the freaking day. This is the only way I know. It became normal. And then I would want to stop drinking. But then it says they are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. So all those sharp edges of life, the only solution I had for that, and I mean, by sharp edges of life, I mean breaking a fingernail or nothing at all happening, just getting that nervous. I didn't really relate to restless, irritable, or discontented, but the word I knew was nervous. That's what really rang true for me. It started in the pit of my stomach. And I had to have that ease and comfort. So if somebody says, why do you drink? I'm drinking for ease and comfort. I'm not at ease or comfortable without alcohol, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. I couldn't understand why other people could drink normally and I couldn't. So I would try to do what they were doing and I couldn't. Why can't I? I will just do like my friend Melissa. She would have me over for a cocktail and she would pour alcohol in a little jigger and mix it up with Coca-Cola. And I would just get nervous watching that little tiny bit of alcohol go into the drink. God, what are you doing? It says after we've succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, that's relapsing, right? I swear it off. I'm never going to do it again. I mean it with all my heart. You could give me a lie detector test. I am done. I am through. But then I will succumb to that mental obsession. And then the phenomenon of craving develops. So once I take the first drink, once the mental obsession tells me you have to drink, and I drink that first drink, then I'm off to the races again. And I pass through the well-known stages of a spree. That means getting really messed up, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. That's happened to all of us. That's what alcoholism is. If you haven't ever emerged remorseful, you shouldn't be on here. You know, you're not done yet, or you're not an alcoholic. Emerging remorseful is something we all can relate to. Oh my God, who saw me? What did I do? Where are my clothes? Where's my car? Where's my jewelry? Where's my purse? You know, or for me, it was always, what did I say? Who did I call? You know, desperately trying to figure out what went wrong. I didn't have a cell phone in those days, I don't think, but just not knowing who I talked to. And then I would get that phone call from my blessed sainted mother in North Carolina saying, are you okay? Or my husband coming in the room and saying, Cindy, we need to talk. Isn't that the worst? Isn't that the worst when somebody says, we need to shoot, please, let's not talk. This is alcohol. And it says, this is the tragedy of it. It's repeated over and over and over and over. For me, it went on for decades, repeated over and over. And never could I find a way out. I'd go to an AA meeting, pick up a new desire chip, and in no time at all, I'd be at it again. This is why this foundation meeting is so important. Unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. Now, here's the good news. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. That's the magic thing. The magic thing is not losing my allergy to alcohol. It's losing my desire to drink. I cannot arm wrestle a desire to drink. That has to be removed from me. A desire to drink is not, and people would say, if you want to drink, call your sponsor. I don't know about you guys. That might work for you. I don't know. If I have the desire to drink, I'm not calling anybody. I'm drinking. I can't fight this thing. This isn't going to be, no human power is going to stop me from picking up a drink. None. I had to have this psychic change. It says, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. The main problem centers in our mind, and that's what has to be changed. That's what has to be changed. On page 24, in italics, it says, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice and drink. With this physical allergy, I've lost the power of choice. The power of control. But with this mental obsession, this problem that centers in my mind, I've lost the power of choice and drink. When that sunk in, I was scared to. I went, oh my God, that's it. I have lost the power of choice. And by losing the power of choice, that doesn't mean that every second of every day you have to be drinking. It means you don't know when or where your next drink is going to be. You can be gung-ho, I'm never drinking again, and then suddenly you're drinking again. It's in the stories in the book. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. Here we go. We are unable at certain times. See, sometimes I could say, no, thank you, I don't drink anymore. But then there would be that time when all of any sanity that I have goes out the window and I pick up that first drink. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. People, well-meaning people would say, well, Cindy, you just forgot your last drink. No, I didn't. I didn't forget it. I just couldn't pull it up with enough weight to outweigh my desire to drink. Makes sense? I don't forget the bad things that happen. It's the insanity of alcoholism that makes me pick up the first drink. That's the delusional thinking of an alcoholic. I know I shouldn't be drinking. I know full well I shouldn't be drinking, and I'm doing it anyway. At one point in the book, it says it's like putting your hand on a hot stove after it's burned you. I know that burns. I'm not going to touch that burner again. I have the sanity not to do that. But with alcohol, it's totally different. I am going to do it again and again and again without this total psychic change. On page 25, it says there is a solution, and there is a solution. But we're not going to like it. Not at first. It says almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. You don't have to like it. All my life, I thought I had to like something before I did it. For the first time in my life, I learned that I could do something I didn't want to do because I didn't want to die. And that's hard for us. I'm working with a number of women right now. If you haven't had a full first step experience, you're not going to do this. And by that first step experience, what I mean is where at a cellular level, you know that you're doomed. You know that you're doomed to pick up a drink and that sooner or later you're going to die. I knew I had lost the power of choice. It sunk in. It wasn't a matter of if, it was just a matter of when. And once I knew that, I wanted to pursue this solution with all the desperation of a drowning man. I did not balk. I did not argue. I did exactly what I was supposed to do and got busy working these steps because I wanted what they had. It says the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. Right above that, it says we have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not ever dreamed. That's not poetry. That's reality. We are rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. So how do I get there? That's where I wanted to be when I was drinking. I wanted to be in a different dimension. I did not like the dimension I was in. And who would? Who would want that life? I can remember thinking to myself on any given day, I will trade lives with anybody. I don't even need to know what your life is like. I will trade lives with you. And on the outside, my life was fabulous. I was in better shape than I've ever been in my life. I was living in a mansion. I had everything in the world. And I would have traded lives with anybody on the street just to not have this horrible, horrible mental obsession with alcohol. I wanted to be rocketed into another dimension. So how do we do this? Well, it says, if you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. I promise you, there is no middle of the road solution. I tried that for decades. There is no plan C, right? It says there are only two choices that we have. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we have two choices, not three, two. One was to go to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. And the other is to accept spiritual help. Okay. So we get to this point, and I was ready for spiritual help. I didn't even know what that meant, but I've worked with a lot of women who don't want to even hear spiritual help, agnostics and atheists. Well, that brings us to step 2. If you've had a step 1 experience where you were absolutely convinced you're powerless over choice and you're powerless over control, and you're screwed. I mean, deep down, you are absolutely screwed at this point. What's to stop you? There has to be some power greater than alcohol, because alcohol certainly was a power greater than myself. So we'll go to step 2, because now I got to start moving through this. I love what Bill does in step 2 in We Agnostics on page 44. He repeats himself over and over throughout the book. Sometimes he uses different words like spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, all, different ways of saying it, but he's trying to get through our thick skulls, this thing. So he's going to say, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. So everything up to page 44 has told you what alcoholism is. And it says, we hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And here it is one more time. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, that's the mental obsession. Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, that's the physical allergy. I've lost all power of control, and I've lost all power of choice. Choice and control, that's what I'm powerless over. My life is unmanageable because I cannot manage the decision not to pick up the first drink. My life is unmanageable whether I drink or not, just in terms of overall manageability. But what we're talking about in step 1 is the unmanageability of being able to stay stopped. Okay. My life, I got a stack of problems this high. Okay. That's not what we're talking about. That's just life. Life just presents problems. That's just part of the human condition. The unmanageability of my life in alcoholism, though, is not being able to say no to the first drink. That's what we're talking about. And it says, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And that's when a lot of faces fall. Some people are ready to get on board with this, and some people aren't. But he assures us that about half our fellowship has been that way. Don't be worried. It says down at the bottom, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. Many of us have been raised in a church, temple, whatever environment. We've been taught the difference between right and wrong. We're not stupid, We've read books. If you're like me, you've read all kind of books before you got to AA on how to get my life together, self-help books and all that stuff. even praying, I would pray to God. I would pray, please stop me from drinking. Please stop me from drinking. And nothing happened. So where I was at this point, I didn't realize it. I was actually an agnostic. I believed that there was a power out there. I just didn't believe that he wanted to do business with me any longer. I felt like I'd given up my last get out of jail free card. I didn't think he wanted anything to do with me. Because other people were saying, by the grace of the loving God, I've been kept sober for 800 years, and I couldn't stay sober for anything. And I was praying and praying and praying. So I was very confused about this. I was spiritually confused. And what I love about this is that Bill's going to make it real simple for us. He's going to explain why these things haven't worked. He's saying that if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life, many of us would have recovered long ago. But these were just simply codes and human efforts to try to get sober. Trying to use my brain, and remember the problem centers in my mind, but trying to use my brain to reason myself into sobriety. That's not it. That's why just simply praying wasn't available to me. Because I was not praying for God's will. I was praying for God to strike me sober. There's work that I'm going to have to do. There's steps I'm going to have to take. There's a pathway to God's grace. It says we could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. It still wasn't there. Through prayer, through all kinds of religious and spiritual and metaphysical and all kinds of avenues that I tried, the needed power still wasn't there. Our human resources marshaled by the will were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Lack of power is our dilemma. Didn't say alcohol is my dilemma. Lack of power was my dilemma. It said we had to find a power greater than by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. I mean, this is where humility has to start taking some sort of form in our life. I have to be humble enough. And this is what stops so many alcoholic women that I've tried to help across the years. And I was like this. And this is why I attract these women and I think tend to my life. It's a lack of humility. It's still thinking that I can rely on my brain to get me through this. I am still approaching it like I would a course in school, like just studying it and trying to figure it out, right? I can't figure it out. It's the opposite of everything I've ever done in my life. I have to do this work first before it will start sinking in. I have to take action. So lack of power is my dilemma. I have to realize that my brain is not powerful enough. It says, but where and how are we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. And what's your problem? Lack of power. I have no power to say no to the first drink. Nothing I can do on my own is going to stop me from taking the first drink. So this book is going to give me directions on how to have this psychic change in order to be relieved of the mental obsession, which is a spiritual process. I can't pray my way to spirituality. I pray every day. I pray all throughout the day. But that isn't nearly as important as me taking the action that I need to do. Faith without works is dead. It says that in the big, big book, and it says it in this book. I have to take action. And sometimes action is inaction. Sometimes it means me getting out of it. But what we're talking about here is the action that we must take.
If you or someone you know is a woman who wants to sustain and grow in her recovery, check out our 3-month non-residential program. Next Step offers community, structure, and accountability to any alcoholic woman at absolutely no cost. Everything we do in Next Step, from the assignments to the accountability group, is to help alcoholic women not only stay sober, but thrive in her recovery. Because we have both in-person and virtual options, we can help women from all over the world. To call into a phone screen to see if you qualify, call 214-764-0793, extension 500.
I love this chapter so very much, and every word of it means a lot to me, but due to lack of time, I want to get to page 53. Bill tells us that logic is great stuff. We like it, and we still like it. It is not by chance that we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. We do need our brains, but the best thing we can do right now is leave our brains out of the equation. It goes on to say, hence we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it is more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy. That's hard to admit, but my former thinking was soft and mushy. And when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. The best thing I can hear from anybody I sponsor is, I don't know. The best thing I can say to my sponsor or to anyone else is, I don't know. All my life I've been saying, I know, I know, I know. I mean, I was that student in school that people hate. I mean, I would have I'd be raising my hand. I have the answer before the question's even asked, because I thought that was my job, to know. The greatest freedom I've been given is to not know. It says, when we became alcoholics crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. Believe it or not, that's a really good starting point. Even if you're at the point, step 2 is simply being willing to believe. Either you believe that there's a God or you're willing to believe there's a God. And then we go over a few pages, and now we're saying we have to face the fact that God is either everything or else he's nothing. Just going with the proposition that God is everything is fake, okay? God is everything. He is everything. I don't even have to believe it. I'm just going along with that proposition that God is everything. I'm going to start there. That sounds like an endpoint, right? But it's really a springboard. Okay, let's just start with the proposition that God is everything. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the capital B bridge of capital R reason. It took me reading this, I don't know how many times, to realize that was capitalized. And it hit me like a brick, that what my God, no matter how much church I attended or whatever I did on a religious side, my true God all my life had been my ability to reason. I might be a falling down drunk. I might be the biggest loser in the world in some areas, but by gosh, I've got a good brain. And I had worshiped my ability to reason. My sponsor really drilled that into me, and it was so good, because if ever I said, I have an idea, she would say, I don't want to hear it. I'm not interested in your ideas. That sounds mean, right? But we really, as sponsors, should be saying that more often, because I got a mind that tells me it's okay to drink. Why would anybody be interested in what I have to say? And she would point that out to me. And I'm so grateful for that. It hurt my little feelings. I got mad at her. Who cares? Who cares? I'm dying of alcoholism. She'd been sober like 23 years or something. And I'm thinking that she's interested in my ideas. I've been worshiping my own ideas. I would run things like, in the beginning, I'd run things. She would tell me to do something. And the first thought that would always come to my mind, well, that doesn't make sense. Cindy, it doesn't need to make sense to you. Your brain is not reliable at this point. Let's set your brain over on the back burner. And I promise you, at step 10, you get your brain back. You get your sanity back. So God is everything. I'm going to lay my brain aside because it says we walk far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands stretched out in welcome. All of you ladies that have been at Maggie's know this. Friendly hands stretch out in welcome and say, come, we love you, we're going to help you. But we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we'd been leaning too heavily on reason. And that's the opposite of humility. Humility is, I don't know. Even if I think I know, if I knew I wouldn't be here, I would have gotten sober and gone merrily on my way. Clearly, I don't know. Clearly, I don't. I'm sponsoring a girl in a treatment center someplace, and rather than call me, she will ask one of her fellow drunks. And I'm going, why? They don't know. They're just like you. Besides, they're friends. They're not going to tell you the truth. You don't need to be friends with your sponsor. You may develop a friendship with your sponsor over time, but in the beginning, you need somebody who's not emotionally invested, who will tell you the truth. And the truth is, if you're new, you don't know crap, right? I can say that because that was me. That was me. I wanted to know. I don't get to know. I get to experience, and it's a whole different thing. The word agnosticism it comes from the Greek, and the Greek word a means without, and gnostic means knowledge. And the kind of knowledge they're talking about is knowledge you gain through experience, not through just simply learning. You know, it moves from the brain into all of the cells of my body. And that's what this psychic change we're looking for is going to be, where it's not just some sort of knowledge I have, but it becomes my entire way of life. I don't know. My sponsor knows a lot more than I do, and God knows even more. So that's where my reliance is going to be. Okay, that's step 2. Step 2 technically is we believe or we become willing to believe. But by the end of the chapter, we're finding a new springboard. I'm not defining God at all. I'm just saying God is everything. And you can choose that either God is everything or nothing. If he's nothing, give up. But if he's everything, he's more than just some man sitting on a throne in the clouds. I think that we talk a lot about the difference between religion and spirituality, and we give lip service to that. But I think it takes a long time to really separate those two things. Religion is great, and I salute you if you have a religious faith. That is awesome. But what we're talking about is really experiencing the power of God, not just singing hymns. That's worship. That's a different thing. But experiencing the power by working these 12 steps. Okay, so we covered step 1 and 2. Step 3 says, came to believe that made a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Okay, my understanding, and probably everybody's understanding, is mushy at this point. It doesn't matter. I'm going with God as everything. And I'm going to make a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of this God, which is everything. We say higher power for a while, but I always read ahead and saw God in the 3rd step and got a little concerned. But God is everything. And I don't know how to do that. I don't know at step 3 how to turn my will and life over to the care of God. But it gives us directions. On page 60, it says, being convinced we were at step 3, which is that we decided. I haven't done it yet. I've just decided to do it. You all have heard the story of 5, if there are 5 frogs on a log and 3 decide to jump in, how many are left? 5. 3 have just made a decision. Nobody's done any jumping yet. It's the same here. I haven't turned my will and life over to the care of God. I've made a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of God. And the way I'm going to be able to do that is by working the rest of the steps. So on page 60, it says, being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and life over to God as we understood Him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? The first requirement, this is a requirement, is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Some people have trouble with that. Am I convinced? Well, let's see. I'm sitting in a treatment center. I'm sitting at Maggie's. This is the best I could do. Okay. So maybe I've been successful in other areas of my life, but in this life and death disease that I have, which I'm doing to myself, it's a self-imposed crisis caused by a disease I have, I'm not successful. My self-will hasn't gotten me anywhere where it comes to that. And even when I've gotten my way, it goes on to say, on that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. It goes on to give you lots of examples of that. It says life would be wonderful if everybody would do as I decided they should do. It gives many examples of the ways that we've been selfish and been trying to run the show ourselves. But I promise you, most of us, when we're reading this for the first time, don't think this applies to us. I don't think that I'm doing this. I don't think that I'm trying to run the whole show. I think I'm really have your best interest at heart. And I'm telling you, you should do this and everything will be great. That's selfish and self-centeredness. I lived my life from day one thinking everything will be okay when everything will be okay. I will be happy when I graduate from high school and I don't have to live with my parents anymore. I will be happy when I finish college and get a good job. I will be happy if I find the right man. I will be happy if I have a baby. I will be happy if I have a house. I will be happy if I have this car. I mean, living, everything will be okay when. Yet I don't think that this applies to me. My whole life has been, if I could just have life on my terms, everything would be fine. That's selfishness. And in the beginning, we don't see that as selfishness. We see that as survival. So it's hard for us to really look at ourselves honestly at this point. Don't worry if you're new to this. Just take it on faith that you really are selfish. You are. You don't know it yet. You think you're a wonderful sharer. If you're like me, you think you're just a people pleaser. And as my sponsor always said to me, look around, Cindy, no one is pleased with you. You fail that one miserably. But still, I think I'm basically a nice person, right? It says, is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages well? If only I get my list out, get my legal pad out and make plans and set goals, and I'm going to lose 10 pounds by Christmas and whatever, then therefore they're happy. That was from Romeo and Juliet. And I love that line. Now are you happy? Now are you happy? No, never was. Every time I got what I thought I needed or wanted, no, I wasn't happy and I'm still drunk. Over on page 62, it says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-pity, self-seeking. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. And then it goes on to say, so our troubles we think are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Amen. We just think that other people are trying to control us and just leave me alone and let me drink. I'm not hurting anybody but myself. None of that's true. I'm hurting everybody whose life I touch. Even if I live alone, no one on this planet can depend on me for anything. I mean, how many times have you called in sick? I can't make it. I'm sick. No one could depend on me. And even if I was sober, I wasn't fully present for anybody, because what am I thinking about? When can I drink again? I am selfish and self-centered to the core at this point, even though I don't believe that. Don't worry, you'll find out more. More will be revealed. and says, this is the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. I didn't understand how I was playing God, but I was playing God every day because I was always just thinking of you. I just want to do what's right for all of you. Welcome to Al-Anon. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, and this is so important. I just sort of read through this back when I did step 3, but every day that I live, this becomes more important. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, life will always be dramatic. Life will always be problematic. We'll have some days that aren't too hard, but most days there are issues, right? So next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father. We are his children. Most good ideas are simple, so important. This is the concept that is the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. Freedom is when I let go and let God. I let go and let God and follow these directions that I believe are God-given to us to save our poor little souls and our poor little lives. We have wonderful third step promises. I'm not going to read those promises right now, but you guys can certainly read them. But the most important one is the last one. It says we were reborn. This is the big do-over. We're going to get to start all over with our lives. And then we have this third step prayer, this beautiful prayer, which is really a promise and a contract we're making with God that if he's going to rebuild my life from the ground up and relieve me of the bondage of self. If you don't think self is bondage, think again. That's my prison. My prison is when I sit down in this chair and I begin to think about me. That's prison. I want to be relieved of the bondage of self, not so that I can relax and have fun, but so that I can better do God's will. That's my promise. He's going to relieve me of that bondage so that I can better do his will. So I'm making a promise. I'm going to do God's will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them will bear witness to those I would help of that power, that love, that way of life. Victory over alcoholism requires that I bear witness and help others. So that's a hint of what's to come. I am responsible for carrying this message to the next alcoholic woman who is suffering. And this is a promise I make. And this is how I begin to abandon myself to God, utterly to God. How do I turn my will and life over to the care of God? This is the beginning. This is the beginning. This is a promise I'm making. And it says next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, which many of us, vigorous action, which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. Though our decision, this third step decision and this third step prayer is a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by an effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. So I used to ask the question, how do I know I've taken step 3? You know you've taken step 3 when you're working step 4. It's as simple as that. We don't take step 3 and then take it now. We immediately get into step 4. I've got to find out what's been blocking me from this power that I so desperately need to get over my mental obsession with alcohol. So I've got to get down to what's been blocking me. And it tells us we're going to be doing a 4-step inventory. And people get so nervous about that. I don't want to do that. I understand. I did a mini inventory on fears the other night. And the woman that was helping me with it said, why do you not want to do that? And I said, I don't want to look at it. I understand. I'm almost 19 years sober, and I still don't want to look at the truth about me. But I had to, because I was being blocked from so many fears that I had. And the truth of the matter is, it is freedom. It's a wonderful experience. It's a wonderful experience. Once I put those things on paper, I started getting free immediately. Step 5, though, is more critical. I mean, I've got to do step 5 too. But there are 3 areas that we're looking at. We're looking at resentments. And so many women go, I only have 5 resentments. Bull. Who's hurt your feelings in your life? Well, that's a resentment. Because we don't ever call it resentment, do we? If we're nice little ladies, we go, well, they hurt my feelings or blah, blah, blah. That's a resentment, okay? It doesn't have to be a burning, like I'm going to kill this person. It's just all the people that somehow got in my way, and that's why I'm drinking, right? So we have to do a resentment inventory, and we have to do a fear inventory, and we have to do an inventory of our sexual misconduct. Somehow people are losing sight of that third inventory. They're looking at it as a harms list. It's a sex inventory, okay? It is a real sex inventory, and we have to look at that. And we're not making a list. Well, back to resentments. We're listing all the people, institutions, anything that we have resentment toward. And then we have a second column that says why. And if you look on page 65, it's not a paragraph. It's just little bullets of information. That's because that's not really that important. It's not important why I resent them. And Joe and Charlie, if you've ever listened to any of their tapes or read any of their books, they talk about, we come in here and we don't know how selfish we are. We've already learned that. We sort of deny that we're that selfish. So we start with what we do know. And we do know who we're mad at. And we do know in great detail why we're mad at them. So we know that. So we're going to start there, start with what we do know. And now we're going to move into what we are going to learn. And that starts in column 3. What does it affect? I'm mad at this person. I wouldn't be mad at this person if it didn't affect basic instincts. So that's my first clue as to why I'm selfish. I'm mad because you harmed my instincts, my self-esteem, my security, my ambitions, my personal or sex relations. I didn't have Adolf Hitler on my resentment list. He should have been at the top, right? But that didn't affect me. I wasn't alive then. That's my first clue as to why I'm selfish. I'm not mad at things that are happening to other people. I'm mad at what's happening to me. So I'm starting to get a clue as to why I'm so selfish, right? And then there's a fourth column, which is not on this page, but if you look at page 67, it says, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. And that's so important. Had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? And now I'm getting a better idea of how I've been selfish and inconsiderate and self-seeking and frightened and dishonest. And every one of those should be checked. I'm going to give you an example real quickly. I had a resentment toward a man who sexually abused me when I was a little girl. Now, I'm not to blame for any of that. I'm not to blame for any of that. And I'm giving you this example because I bet most people have had this happen. So I'm not to blame. I'm entitled to this resentment, right? I'm not to blame. Well, so when I did my 4th step, I didn't have anything in that 4th. And when I moved to the 5th step, I learned I had something I was all of those things. It's not letting him off the hook. What he did was terrible. That was an awful thing. And I'm not to blame for any of that. But that was something that had happened like 50 years ago or more. And I was still using that as my trump card for failure. Oh, you don't understand. I was sexually abused as a child. It really harmed me. And it really caused me lots of problems in my life. Well, today, it no longer has to cause you problems in your life. You can be free. Set that man free. Let's say this, Cindy. Did you ever drive your car under the influence of alcohol and could have wiped out families? It's not, sexual abuse is awful, but it's not the only bad thing that happens in this life. I could have murdered people. Who knows? Maybe I did. I don't know. And I want to be free of that. And that story gets better because I actually, well, we're not there yet. But I began to see that I had been dishonest because that was something that was one little thread in the tapestry of my life that I'm holding that other person responsible for, so that I don't ever have to be responsible for any of my actions because this thing happened to me. And that is selfish and that is dishonest because I'm a grown woman now and I don't want to hold on to this any longer. So we have resentments, we have fears. I love the fear page. It's one of my favorite pages on page 68, where it says we reviewed our fears thoroughly. That's my biggest issue today. That's why I had to do an inventory on my fears, because there's a lot of things I can be afraid of right now. But we put them on paper and we ask ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? If I'm depending on me to solve any problem, I need to be afraid. I have to I have to turn to God reliance rather than self-reliance. Self-reliance is good as far as it goes, but it doesn't go far enough. So in my fear inventory, I'm learning that I can become reliant on an infinite God rather than a finite me. Infinite power. And as I learn that, my faith grows and I'm able to learn more about turning my will and life over to the care of God as I understand Him. He's relieved me of the obsession to drink. I got relieved of that early, thank you, God. But like as things came up, I remember we had to sell that big mansion that I was talking about because lost everything. Had to sell it. And I was terrified it wasn't going to sell. And I remember calling my sponsor and saying, I'm in so much fear this house isn't going to sell. And she said, I'd be afraid too if I was relying on you to sell my house. I have to become reliant on God. If I am looking to me to solve a big problem, I better, I only make the problem worse. So I'm going to be learning to rely on infinite God rather than my finite self. And that's what the fear inventory is about. And also I learned through the fear inventory that every fear I had was something that wasn't going to affect me. I wasn't afraid about the tsunami over in Thailand or wherever it was. I was just afraid. All of my fears were self-centered. All of my fears were about me. So I'm getting a better understanding of the selfishness that's described in step 3. We get to the sex inventory, and that's not an inventory of everybody you ever slept with. That's an inventory of how your sex instincts have harmed other people. Maybe I just flirted with your husband at a party. Okay? That's a sex misconduct. Using my sex power selfishly is what I'm learning in this inventory. Moving on, we have to do this with another person. It says that on page 72, in actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. I have to do this with another person. As much as I would like to just go off into the woods and on a mountaintop and talk to God, there is so much relief in sharing this with your sponsor. So much relief. So much relief. Because I'm going to be really learning the truth that the problem is me. We're afraid to learn that truth, but that is part of the freedom we're talking about. If the problem is me, something can be done. If I have to wait for all of you to straighten out before I can be happy, I am really screwed. I'm learning a new way. I'm learning a new way that regardless of how anyone out there behaves, I can be okay. I can be okay. And without the help of a sponsor hearing my 5th step, I wouldn't learn that. I wouldn't learn the deep root that has to be removed. This root of selfishness is the root. Selfishness is the root of my problem. And it's just like pulling weeds. If I don't pull that out, I'm never going to get better. I'm not unselfish today. I'm just a lot less selfish than I used to be. Sufficient to bring about recovery. When we do this 5th step, we're asked to go and spend an hour alone. And I would encourage you to spend that full hour. Don't cheat it. Spend the hour reviewing all of this prayerfully with God. And then it takes us to step 6. I'm sorry, I'm losing. My book is in the car. I'm using somebody else's book right now. When we get to 6, okay. If we can answer to our satisfaction after we've spent that time reviewing everything that we've done, because that is part of the 5th step. It's going home and spending that hour alone. It's part of the 5th step. Then we can look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. Sometimes there are things we don't want to let go of. You know, you might be in love with a married man and you don't want to give that one up. And it says we pray and ask God to help us be willing to remove what's objectionable. And then when we're ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. I don't walk away. In Bill's story, he talks about walking away perfect. That wasn't my experience. I have to learn. I have to keep growing in this program. Selfishness has a role in my life today to remind me that I need to get some humility, to remind me I need to keep doing this work. So I'm not going to walk away like a perfect person. As one of my sponsors, after my other sponsor had left the group, Cliff became my sponsor, and I would call him with my 10 steps and I'd go, why am I still doing this? And he'd go, Cindy, if you get perfect, forgive my religious reference here. He said, somebody's going to nail you to a cross. And the only reason I'm saying that to you is don't expect that you're going to become perfect. We are not saints. We are willing to grow along spiritual lines, but enough becomes removed to bring about recovery. That's the point. And we have to keep growing. If I get too good, I'm not going to keep growing. And then we get into 8 and 9 of making amends. And that's the step that everybody's most afraid of. And I'm here to tell you that's the most freeing step of all. After you start making your amends, and you start with some that aren't too difficult to make, and you move forward with other amends and keep moving forward and keep moving forward, I experienced a level of maturity for the first time in my life, because then I was able to learn to look people right in the eye and say, I was wrong. And I didn't vanish. I was so afraid that if I said I was wrong or said what I did, the whole world would stop spinning on its axis. Nothing bad happened. And it became easier and easier to say, I was wrong. Today, there are times when I have to stop myself and say, that is what I just said isn't true. I am so sorry. There I go again. That wasn't true. And nothing bad happens. And it's freedom. It's freedom to be able to be wrong and to be able to admit that you're wrong and to be willing to make amends to those people that have put up with our ridiculousness for such a long time. So steps 8 and 9 are not the boogeyman. They really aren't. In the beginning, they seem so terrifying, but that is part of that road to freedom we're going down. And then as we make amends, we get immediately into step 10, which is where we continue to make an inventory of what's been going on in step 10. And we have specific directions on how to do step 10. And my favorite part about step 10 are the promises. We have specific directions on how to take step 10. And for this purpose, I'm not going to go through that right now. But I do want to read the promises of step 10, because it says, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. The fight's over now. The fight is over. For by this time, sanity will have returned. You get your brains back. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle. If I have no other proof of God except the fact that I don't pick up a drink, that's all the proof I need to know that there is a power greater than myself. That I wake up every morning and I don't think about drink. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we have been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. I've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. This is our experience. This is what it means to be a recovered alcoholic. The problem's been removed. I honor that power greater than me by saying I am a recovered alcoholic because the problem's been removed. He's not holding it right here, just waiting for me to screw up. But I have to continue taking action. That is our experience. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience as long as we stay in fit spiritual condition. And we stay in fit spiritual condition by dealing with 10, 11, and 12. I mean, starting here with 10, every day, when resentment pops up, when fear pops up, when we don't know which way to turn, when we've done something sexually that would cause harm to others, we tell this. We ask God to remove it, and then we talk to someone about it, and then we make amends if necessary, and then we turn our thoughts to someone we can help. And then in step 11, we have specific directions in the book on how to do prayer and meditation so that we can get closer to this power greater than ourselves. And they're beautiful directions. We follow them to the letter, as my sponsor always told me, read just the black part on the page. And that's how I started with step 11, just doing what it said. At night, do this. In the morning, do that. And then we add other things that are of interest to us to help build our spiritual life. And then the most important part is when we get to step 12. You can't stay sober. I can't stay sober if I'm not carrying this message to other women. The best way to stay sober is to constantly be of help to other women alcoholics. I was so blessed in this program to be able to have 3 commitments a week where I went and carried the message. This is how I got to know God. I got to know God through the faces of other women alcoholics and seeing how he worked in their lives and being able to share what God had done for me. It's critical, but there are directions in this book on how to carry the message. We're not out there selling sobriety. We're out there sharing what's wrong with us. First of all, making sure people understand what alcoholism is, and then taking them through this work as it's outlined in this book. My spiritual awakening really happened in step 12. Step 12 is a 3-part deal. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry the message to other alcoholics. There are 3 parts to it. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps is the first part. The second one, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and their directions in how to do that, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And that one we kind of leave out a lot of the time, but I do want to say that's really important. I have a mixed family now, and even coming down to who we're going to spend Christmas with, I have to practice these principles in all my affairs. It's not just who I want to be with at Christmas. I have to be unselfish. I have to be unselfish with my time with others. I have to practice these principles in all my affairs. I have to catch when I'm being selfish or dishonest or self-seeking or frightened or inconsiderate, and I have to ask God to remove it. I have to do these things in all my affairs, not just at meetings, not just at Maggie's, not just when I'm helping another drunk, but with all the non-alcoholics in my life. And it's really been an incredible journey. I don't even recognize the person I am today compared to the person I used to be. It's shocking to me. It's just shocking. And the longer we stay sober and the more we grow spiritually, life just is an unending adventure in a way of peace and happiness, regardless of what the circumstances are that are going on around us. That is the spiritual awakening, that I can live at perfect peace and ease with God, the God of my understanding. Anyway, thank you for letting me be part of this today. I'm sorry I get discombobulated, but I've been in isolation a lot, doing Zoom, and sometimes it's a little awkward to get my thoughts all together, but it's been a real honor to be with you guys today and to share this foundation meeting with you. Usually a foundation meeting doesn't go on this long, but thanks for tolerating it.
No, it was perfect. It was wonderful. Thank you so much, Cindy. And I will see all you guys later. Oh, for our listeners, if you loved what you heard, please leave a review or upload this to your Instagram story. Let us know what takeaways you had, anything you learned, and tag the Magdalen House. We would love to hear from you. Everyone else, have a wonderful, wonderful day.
We hope you've enjoyed this From the Vault re-release of the Magdalen House podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.